Can you keep a secret? In the middle of the big green forest stood a little old house. In it lived a blacksmith and his 3 pretty daughters. Tansy, the eldest, was dark. Celandine, the second, was fair. Grindelia, the youngest, had hair as brown and glossy as a harvest mouse and eyes as blue as cornflowers. But Tansy and Celandine were forever teasing her because she was so forgetful. "Watch the pot until we return," her father said, as he and her 2 sisters set off to market. And 5 minutes later, Grindelia was trying to remember what she'd been told to do. At last she decided it must have been the spinning. By the time the others came home, she had spun 10 skeins of wool. But oh dear, the stew was burnt. "You are the most forgetful girl that ever was," they scolded. One green and golden day, a prince came riding through the forest. When he saw the little house, he got off his horse and knocked at the door. When Tansy opened it, he thought she was the prettiest girl he had ever seen, until he looked over her shoulder and saw Celandine and Grindelia. "I declare, you are each as pretty as the other." The prince made up his mind that one of them should be his wife. But how was he to choose between them? "I will marry whichever one of you can keep a secret," he told them. The 3 hid their faces in their aprons and said, "Oh." "Can you keep a secret, Tansy?" the prince asked. "I hope so," Tansy answered. "We'll see." And he whispered in her ear. "Oh, fancy that," said Tansy. "I will come back in 7 days," the prince told her. "If my secret has been kept, you shall be my wife." No sooner had he ridden away than Celandine and Grindelia began to ask what the prince had whispered, but Tansy refused to say. "It's a secret." But as the days went by, Tansy longed to tell the secret to someone else. At last she thought, "I will go and whisper it down the well. That's as good as telling someone, but it will stay a secret." So off she went to the well, and leaning over the edge, she whispered the prince's secret aloud. "Oh, now I feel much better." On the 7th day, the prince came back. "Have you kept my secret, Tansy?" "Yes, indeed, your majesty." He asked Celandine and Grindelia, "Has she told you my secret?" No, she has not, they replied. So the prince held out his hand to Tansy. "Then you shall be my—" But before he could say wife, in at the door hopped a little green frog. "Stop," he croaked. "She told me. She came and whispered it into the well. I was at the bottom, and I heard it." And there and then the frog croaked out the prince's secret. "There is a hole in the heel of your left sock." The prince let go of Tansy's hand and looked at her sadly. "In that case, I am afraid you cannot be my wife," he said. Turning to Celandine, he asked, "Can you keep a secret?" "I think so, your majesty." "We'll see." And he whispered a new secret in her ear. "Ah, well, I never did," cried Celandine. "If you keep my secret for a week, you shall be my wife." The minute he was out of sight, Tansy and Grindelia asked her what the prince had whispered, but Celandine would not tell. "It's a secret." But oh dear, as the 7 days went by, the secret was more and more hard to keep. If only she could share it with someone. At last she thought, "I'll go and whisper it in the orchard. That's as good as telling someone, but it will stay a secret." So off she went to the orchard, where the tops of the trees were floating in pink and white blossom. She stood beneath a fruit tree and whispered the prince's secret out loud. "Oh, now I feel much better." The next day the prince came back. "Have you kept my secret, Celandine?" "Yes, indeed, your majesty." The prince asked Tansy and Grindelia if their sister had told them the secret. No, came the reply. So he held out his hands to Celandine. Then you shall be my... But before he could say wife, there came a buzzing at the window, and in swarmed a cloud of bumblebees. Say no more, droned the bees. She told us. She came to the orchard and whispered it aloud, and we in the trees heard it. Then the bees hummed the prince's secret aloud. There is a hole in the toe of your right sock. The prince let go of Celandine's hand and looked at her sadly. In that case, I am afraid you cannot be my wife. He turned to Grindelia. Can you keep a secret? I don't know, Your Majesty. Let's see. And he whispered a third secret in her ear. Well, exclaimed Grindelia. Then off the prince rode to his castle. Immediately Tansy and Celandine cried, Tell us what he said. But Grindelia shook her head and put her hands over her ears. I can't. Now, you remember how forgetful Grindelia was? Well, as the 7 days came and went, she grew sadder and sadder. If only, she sighed, if only I could remember it. But although she racked her brain, the prince's secret had gone in one ear and out of the other. On the 7th day, the prince came back. Have you kept my secret? No, I haven't, she replied, because she was a very truthful girl. I've lost it. I've clean forgotten it. Forgotten it? Exclaimed the prince. Fancy that! Well, I never. Then he looked at Grindelia's glossy brown hair and eyes the colour of cornflowers. She's the one for me, he thought to himself. I don't care if she can keep a secret or not. And he took Grindelia's hands in his. Will you marry me? Grindelia looked at the prince. He had a kind, gentle face, so she said yes, kissed her father and sisters goodbye, and rode off with the prince. She forgot to take off her apron, they laughed. No one ever found out what the prince had whispered in Grindelia's ear. She and her prince lived happily together in the castle on the hill. And although Grindelia never had to spin wool or sweep the floor or watch the pot, she did sit down with a basket of mending and a darning needle every night, for the prince was terribly hard on his socks.